this shows up, I'm going to be talking to you about female preferences among heterospecifics and how it's adaptive in hybridization. I have this great, cute GIF of a frog calling, which might be the problem. Okay, so excellent. All right. So I introduced myself. There's the frog. All right, moving on. So, of course, as many of us are realizing, hybridization can be a really important evolutionary force, implicated in things such as hybrid speciation, adaptive introgression, or even patterns of species collapse. However, whether or not these larger scale evolutionary processes will actually occur will depend on the consequences of hybridizing for individuals. And those consequences can actually vary. So we often think about hybridization being fitness reducing, producing no offspring or perhaps sterile offspring. But we also know that it can be fitness enhancing, producing such as if conspecific mates are limited, or perhaps if hybrid offspring are actually better adapted than pure species offspring are. However, this is unlikely to actually be sort of a binary thing. It's much more likely that we can have some kind of continuum. So we might imagine a case where we have two individuals that fall somewhere along this axis. They vary in some kind of trait, and an individual who might be interested in mating with them could reap differential fitness benefits from mating with one or the other. So we were interested in exploring this idea in the system of spadefoot toads. I just want to emphasize that this isn't like a really weird idea or anything, because this is like basically how regular sexual selection works. We know that potential mates can vary in quality, and that individuals may be able to assess that quality and mate accordingly. So in these spadefoot toads, okay, they're very cute. So this is a male multiplicata, I'm also going to call multiplicata, mating with a spade bombifrons female, also call her bombifrons. So they readily hybridize where they co-occur in sympatry in the southwestern USA. And in particular, I'm going to be focusing on work we've done in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. So here we know that F1 males are actually sterile, but F1 females are fecund and make back to pure species males. Something else to note about this system is that it's driven by female choice. So we actually know that females evaluate males that are conspecifics based on aspects of their calls. Just to give you an idea of what these calls sound like, here's and look like. This is a multiplicata call, and you notice it has a sort of like pulsating quality to it, which is going to be important later on. And a bombifrons call is really different. So this is bombifrons. So they sound kind of like ducks. They actually have this pulsating quality to them too. It's called pulse rate, but it's so fast we can't hear it, and you can't visually distinguish between them either. So another thing that's important here is that you might expect from southeastern Arizona is that it's really dry for most of the year. There's not a whole lot of water, so what the frogs do is they wait for seasonal monsoon rains to come through and fill up these ponds. They breed in these ponds, but the problem is that these ponds can have really highly variable amounts of water. So they might look like that, and then all too often they look like that. So they might last anywhere from a couple of weeks to just a couple of days. So for frogs, this is kind of a problem, who have tadpoles that must metamorphose before the ponds dry. So what we observe is that bombifrons females who will mate with bombifrons males when the ponds are really deep and long-lasting. Bombifrons tadpoles develop kind of slowly relative to hybrids and multiplicata, but that's not a problem in these long-lasting ponds. However, it is more of an issue if ponds are really shallow and prone to drying up quickly. We actually observed then that bombifrons females are more likely to prefer to mate with heterospecifics, so with the multiplicata males, leading to the production of hybrid offspring that are more likely to successfully metamorphose before the ponds actually dry. So female bombifrons adaptively hybridize based on environmental conditions they find themselves mating in. So to return to this idea of fitness reducing and fitness enhancing hybridization, I just described a case where hybridizing for bombifrons females is fitness enhancing relative to mating with a conspecific. However, so now we can ask, well, do potential multiplicative males actually vary in quality in a way that matters for these bombifrons females? So we actually know then that if they're going to vary in some way, if females are going to assess them, it's probably in some aspect of their calls. So we asked then, can these bombifrons females actually evaluate these multiplicative males in a way and prefer them in a way that will maximize their fitness during hybridization? So can females optimize their fitness via mate choice? So to start off with, we first looked at what the fitness of these hybrid offspring looked like. So what I did was I recorded a bunch of multiplicative males out in the field, bred them to bombifrons females, and reared up their tadpoles, euthanized them before metamorphosis, and then took a couple of metrics of their fitness. So you're looking at what I call fitness metric on the y-axis here. So individuals closer to the top were really heavy, really long, and really well developed relative to individuals closer to the bottom here. And you can see here on the x-axis is actually that pulse rate that I already told you about. So what we found is that pulse rate was the most significant predictor of the fitness of the offspring. So here's what that data actually looked like. So you're looking at the best model fit with the 95% confidence intervals, and the colors represent different families. I want to note that this is robust with those three families sort of off on the ends, and that hybrids with dads who had slower pulse rates had higher fitness. So now that we knew this, we could ask, well, do females actually prefer those heterospecific males that had these slower pulse rates? These males that sired these fitter hybrid offspring. So to do this, I gave females two-way choice tests, and I gave them a choice of multiplicative calls that had slower pulse rates and faster pulse rates, basically. And I did these under two different environmental conditions, what I call shallow water and deep water. So I did it in shallow water conditions because that simulates those shallow, rapidly drying ponds I already told you about. And we know that there, those females are actually interested in hybridizing. And I contrasted that with deep water conditions where ponds meant to simulate when ponds are long-lasting and when females actually prefer to mate with conspecifics. So in shallow water, what we saw was that females significantly preferred the heterospecific call that had the slower pulse rates. So again, this is the call that's associated with the increased hybrid fitness, and that they behave differently, so they don't do the same thing under deep water conditions where they're not interested in hybridizing. So they have no preferences, and if they have any preference, maybe it's perhaps a weak one for the slightly faster pulse rate. That might be potentially because bombifrons has a much faster pulse rate. And this is significantly different between the two, suggesting that they actually prefer these males only when hybridization is adaptive, and they're not paying attention when it's not. So this was kind of an exciting result for us because we didn't necessarily expect that females could have these kinds of really specific refined preferences. So we then wondered, well, where might this preference have come from? Is this something that's pre-existing? Can it be explained by sexual selection among conspecifics? Or has it become actually refined from allopatry into sympatry in these interactions with the heterospecific? So then we took advantage of females from a different region, so from the Great Plains. These are all bombifrons from allopatry. And I gave them calls that varied in pulse rate. So these are now conspecific calls that varied in pulse rate. And this is to evaluate whether or not females use pulse rate in sexual selection among their own species. What I observed is that females from this region of allopatry, so all bombifrons, significantly prefer the slower pulse rate call of their conspecifics, suggesting that they're using that in some type of sexual selection among conspecifics. So then you might be like, okay, so they prefer these slow pulse rate calls. Is that like what led them to hybridize, right? So the multiplicator have the really slow pulse rates. Maybe they just think multiplicator are like ultra attractive bombifrons. That is not the case, so we gave these females who've never experienced multiplicator calls that vary in pulse rate, and they don't know what they're doing, so they just kind of like pick, is what it looks like. So to conclude, then what it appears to be is that these females are using pulse rate to evaluate conspecifics in allopatry, and they're also using pulse rate to evaluate heterospecifics in sympatry, but this has actually become refined because these allopatric females don't express this preference. So to conclude, then what I've told you about today is we know now that bombifrons females prefer heterospecifics as the fittest hybrid offspring, and that this might have originated from some kind of pre-existing preference that's used in sexual selection, and it has become refined in sympatry. And I think there's really cool implications here for thinking about things like sexual selection, because what we actually have is actually a case where females of one species could be exerting sexual selection on males of a different species, who may be able to evolve away or towards this selective pressure depending on the consequences of hybridizing for them. It also can bias patterns of introgression that we observe. So instead of females mating randomly with any other heterospecific, females may be selectively picking certain heterospecifics, and the genes from those heterospecifics that are actually getting into the bomb population might be biased from the start. I also think it's cool because we don't usually think about the evolution of preferences in this way, right? I don't think we usually think it's even possible that females can pick between different types of heterospecifics, but this suggests that they can. So with that, I'll give thanks to my lab mates and those who helped me with stats, my funding sources, and I will take any questions.